Hello. Looks like we have people coming in.
Yeah.
Mario, do you just want me to go for it? Are you going to tell me when to start?
You can just go when you're ready.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just going to make sure I can see the chat. My name is Gina Rada, and I'm here to do a session for you guys on the Virtual Compliance Assistant, which is a free tool by Energy Code ACE to help support the Certificate of Compliance forms and the Certificate of Installation forms required by the Energy Code. I'd love to hear your questions as they come up. You can either put them in the chat or ask them out loud. I have a tendency to get my own world if I don't hear voices, so do feel free to interrupt me if you guys have a question. So we're going to do this a little bit of combination of some slides and also doing it live. So let's see how this goes with you guys today. Mario, did you want to record this? Is it being recorded?
Yeah. We'll record it.
So everyone, please be aware we are recording this event.
Okay, yeah, it is being recorded.
Okay, great. Okay, let's get going with this. Again, my name is Gina Rada. I own an energy consulting firm here in Northern California, Gable Energy, and I'm a sub-consultant to the utilities to help the rest of the world make sense of the energy code here in California and how we go about showing compliance. So I'm really going to concentrate on the certificate of installation form today because there are new forms for the installation form, and I am aware that as you guys being acceptance test technicians and also potentially the contractor itself, these are the responsibility of the contractor to provide, but you as the ATT, as that contractor, of course, have a one-up, or you can be that person who can give the installing contractor assistance in producing these forms, of which need to be uploaded to NLCII as part of the documentation gathering associated with your guys' jobs. Now, there is more than one way to go about doing the certificate of installation form. I'll talk about a couple of those and walk you through the virtual compliance assistant. Now, we're going to do this using an indoor lighting alteration project of an existing building, just to give you a look and a feel of something that feels comfortable as we go about doing this. So these new installation forms, the certificate of installation forms, are in play for projects that submit for permit under the 2022 code cycle, which applies for projects that apply for permit as of January 1st of this year, 2023. There are a lot of forms, and they added even more with this code cycle. So for all of our non-residential buildings, and our high-rise multifamily buildings, that's multifamily buildings that are 4 habitable stories or more, all the forms will start with an NR for non-residential. Mea culpa on the fact that that also captures what's going on with high-rise multifamily. You need to be aware of another form out there that's brand new to this code cycle, and that is the LM form for low-rise multifamily. Those are low-rise multifamily buildings of 3 habitable stories or less. So when we talk about LM forms, there is other registration requirements you need to be aware of from a HERS provider. So LM forms, if they are associated with a project that has any HERS measures, there's a suite of the LMCC, the LMCI, and the LMCV forms that must be registered with a HERS provider. The NRCA forms, which will apply to both NRCC jobs and LMCC jobs, all the forms we're talking about today, and building types. The NRCI stays the same, NRCA, no matter if it's a low-rise multifamily building, a high-rise multifamily building, or a non-residential building. So the next two letters at the beginning of the form name tells us what that form is there to support. The certificate of compliance is to support the promise of how the design and install is meeting the energy code. And then we also have our certificate of installation, certificate of acceptance, and certificate of verification. The next letter groupings tells us what that form is meant to support. We're going to concentrate on the LTI, the indoor lighting form today. Another way that people can show compliance for indoor lighting in a conditioned space is using the performance approach, which would be an NRCC PRF or an LMCC PRF, of which we might find lighting in the conditioned spaces in that report, in addition to a second report, which would be the NRCC LTI or the LMCC LTI that supports lighting in unconditioned spaces, because lighting in unconditioned spaces is never allowed to be documented within the performance approach. The last letter of the form tells us who is the primary user of the form. If it ends with E, that means the enforcement agency or authority having jurisdiction is responsible for enforcing the information associated with that document. Anything that adds with an H, that's the HERS rater. Anything that's an F is the installing contractor, the field technician. And of course, you guys know anything that ends with an A is associated with a certified acceptance test technician, whether that be a lighting feature or a mechanical feature. So the life of a job. So we're at design, and this is when we're producing our certificate of compliance forms, the NRCC LTI or the NRCC PERF, or if it's low-rise multifamily, the LMCC LTI or the LMCC PERF form. And that's what they're promising is designed as meeting the code. But as we're building and there's any changes in the field, we also need to make sure that those forms stay true to the install. And a lot of people forget the fact that that original certificate of compliance form still has to show compliance to the energy code with whatever install ends up happening, because this is important when it comes to the certificate of installation form. The certificate of installation form supports the installed features as were promised by the certificate of compliance form. So if there have been changes between the certificate of compliance and the certificate of installation, we need to go back and make sure the certificate of compliance truly reflects that install equal or better. And you'll see that with the new way that the installation form is fed by the certificate of compliance form, that's incredibly important for the installation form to work properly. We also have during construction our certificate acceptance forms. I will not be talking about those today at all. You guys have got those down with your provider. And I will not be talking about certificate of verification, of which there are no certificate of verification forms associated with lighting. The end of the day, we want to make sure all this documentation is provided on site for the inspector to review and is given to the building owner. The only form the building departments have to maintain in their files is the certificate of compliance form. But as you guys know, you have to collect the certificate of compliance form, the certificate of installation form, and the certificate of acceptance forms to upload to NRCI system. So let's concentrate on the certificate of installation form. So there's more than one way to skin the cat, shall we say, but there's one way that's better and there's one way that's bad. So this is one way that's just not available anymore. This is the old school certificate of installation form, which is a paper form. It basically said, hey, contractor, tell us what is the date of the certificate of compliance form you use to base your install on. So the contractor is always to be aware of what was promised in the certificate of compliance. And please document anything that's different than what was promised in that certificate of installation form. Well, the state has a goal, and the state of California has a goal to collect the data on projects, not just what's promised, but what is actually installed. And so there's a process that is trying to be put into play that's trying to collect the data. And that's part of what you're doing when you're uploading to NLCAA site, but also if you use particular tools available by the industry. Now, the Energy Commission was under pressure to provide paper forms for this 2022 code cycle, but they were never, ever developed to be used as paper forms. So if you go to the Energy Commission's website, you will see that you can find the certificate of installation forms there in paper form, but they're very unfriendly. And the Energy Commission actually would prefer no one would ever use these. You'll find you have one line item to document the entire lighting system, one line item to document the lighting controls, which is never going to be enough for any project that I'm usually associated with. It's rare. We only have one light type and one control type and one space type. So these are very unwieldy. They are not code checked. They don't have that code infrastructure language written in underneath the hood like we were used to in the 2022 code. They are simple, dumb paper forms, and I strongly encourage no one use these. So what can you use instead? So we're going to talk about this free tool available from Energy Code ACE. Energy Code ACE is paid for by you, the ratepayers of California. So I like to tell everyone, come use it because you've invested already. There's no additional cost to use anything associated with the virtual compliance assistant or anything on the Energy Code ACE website. And this virtual compliance assistant was developed a couple of code cycles ago. So it's been around for a while supporting certificate of compliance forms, but it was developed to be the TurboTax of filling out the compliance forms. And they added to the virtual compliance assistant for this code cycle, not only the certificate of compliance forms for both high-rise, low-rise, and non-residential buildings, but also the certificate of installation forms that are fed from that certificate of compliance form. So why should you use the virtual compliance assistant? So if you use the virtual compliance assistant, one, to document your certificate of compliance forms, or you're going to help your contractor, or you are the contractor. If you start with the VCA, you'll see that there is a link from the certificate of compliance form done in the virtual compliance assistant that feeds to the certificate of installation form. But some of you might be using the performance approach, because remember, the performance approach is also a means of showing documentation for our lighting systems. If the performance approach is used and you use Energy Pro will populate to the certificate of installation tool with the virtual compliance assistant. Unfortunately, right now, people who use CBAC, which is the state certified software, or if they use IES-VE, we don't have the means to pre-populate the certificate of installation anymore in the virtual compliance assistant. And unfortunately, that means if people are using CBAC or if they're using IES-VE as a performance engine, you'll have to use those horrible paper forms we're really trying to not have people use because they're so very unfriendly and they don't help support what's happening in compliance. Now, you do have to set up an account with the Energy Code ACE. Now, I want to promise you guys that this is, managed by the utilities. It is paid for by you, the ratepayers, but managed by the utilities. And they take your private information and everyone's private information very seriously. So when you create an account, it's just collecting your email because you need a way to log in and find your library of projects. You can make up an email address. We don't care as long as this email address is a means for you to go in and log into the system. Now, you can also tell us about other information you might want to hear about, like we're about to go live with our fact sheet on indoor and outdoor and sign lighting requirements. Our indoor lighting wheel went live quite a few weeks ago and is available on our website. So you might want to say, hey, I want to know about what's going on with lighting and with Energy Code ACE to be up to speed on it. We just went live with all of our classes. We have 2 indoor lighting classes, 1 for controls, 1 for determining the wattage allowances. We have 1 outdoor lighting class, and we also have a 4th lighting class that's just about residential lighting associated with single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes, multifamily dwelling units, and hotel-motel rooms. So much available on our website. So you will also see that the virtual compliance assistant will not collect personal information. So that means there will always be a second step once you have your compliance form from the virtual compliance assistant to put in the address information, to put in the signature information, because this tool will not collect or populate that information. Okay, so let's talk about doing a walkthrough. Are there any questions so far? You guys have been a very quiet group. Want to make sure you guys are feeling comfortable with the content so far, because we're going to get you guys set up with what we need to do and how to best be prepared to use the virtual compliance assistant for the certificate of installation forms. Now, step 1 is to collect all the appropriate material. This could be receipts, packing slips, approved submittals are a beautiful way to go. Anything that it can support what was actually installed at this physical address, because we're going to be needing that to support what was installed versus what was promised. So we do need the certificate of compliance form that was utilized as the promise. Now, the Energy Code requires that the certificate of compliance documentation be included in the design drawings for permit. Now, if it was an over-the-counter permit in which full design drawings were not required for the job, a lot of times that certificate of compliance form is attached to the drawings. It might be free floating, but it is required to be collected by the building department, so it should be part of that permitted set of design documents. Now, we need to have the latest and greatest certificate of compliance form. If there were any changes, we need to make sure to update those. And we're going to be looking for a compliance ID. The only way you're going to get a compliance ID is if they used the virtual compliance assistant to do the certificate of compliance form, or they used Energy Pro to do the prescriptive certificate of compliance forms, or they used Energy Pro to produce the performance report. Those are the 3 ways we can get a compliance ID. Any other way that someone showed compliance with the certificate of compliance form is not currently supported with the Virtual Compliance Assistant Certificate of Installation tool. We're going to make sure that after we go through this tool, we print out the form, we review it, we make sure we feel comfortable with it. Yep, this is exactly what we want to sign off and take responsibility for. We need to make sure to collect those signatures and important information such as addresses and contact information. And remember, the certificate of installation not only gets uploaded to the NRCI system, it has to be left on site for the building inspector and the building owner. Okay, we are going to do a project in which we are going to rewire 120 watt HID pendant lights, and we're going to replace all 20 with new lighting, an 80 watt LED retrofit kit. But, and the contractor ended up finding something that met the lumen output, met the qualifications of the project, but uses only 60 watts versus the 80 watt LED fixture that was spec'd during the design phase. So we're going to use the tool to help and determine, is what the contractor proposing equal or better? Because what I really want people to understand is the certificate of installation tool can be used as a means to support contractors putting together bids on projects. What do they really need to bid for that project? They can be used to help support their submittal review process. Is what they're promising or wanting to submit equal or better, and only then submit it to be reviewed and approved. For this particular project, we're going to indicate that there are no additional controls needed, that all controls needed for the project were already available on site. I need to make sure I have the certificate of compliance form. So they used the prescriptive method, and they used the virtual compliance assistant to put together this certificate of compliance form. I also need to get specs, approval, submittals, etc. Here I have a cut sheet that was approved specific to the product that the contractor would like to install or already did install on this project. So what I'm going to do now is play some funny business here, and I am going to bring in the virtual compliance assistant. Mario, can you see the Energy Code ACE website at this time?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I am now in the Energy Code ACE website, www.energycodeace.com. And I want to show you the many different ways you can find the virtual compliance assistant. One, you can go to the leaderboard at the top here, and you can go to forms, because, well, that's what this is all about, is compliance forms, right? And you can see that there is a Get Forms section on the Energy Code ACE website. We're looking for a non-residential 2022 form. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. I know I want a certificate of installation form, and you'll see that it's going to list the various installation forms and give me the link to fill it out online, and that takes you to the virtual compliance assistant. But wait, there's more ways to do this. So I'm going to go back to our main screen, and I'm going to go to our tools section. We separate everything on the Energy Code ACE website into 3 buckets. Is it a tool to help you complete your task? Is it training to help you understand your task? And is it a resource? Is it a resource or a fact sheet or a trigger sheet or a checklist that helps you accomplish your task? The virtual compliance assistant is a tool. So we're going to go into the tool bucket, and I can always in the search bar start typing things in. They have improved the search functions of this website tremendously in the last year. So if you have been disappointed in the past, I hope you'll try it again, because it's definitely improved. And here are all the various tools we have. Here's that indoor lighting wheel that we just went live with for 2022. And here we have the virtual compliance assistant. But there's a third way. There's actually 2 other ways to find it, but I'm going to go to my favorite way. So I have already signed in because I want to go to my library of projects, because the virtual compliance assistant will keep all the projects that you've worked on under my projects so that you have your library and it's easy access. Now, one thing is, let's say I have this lighting test project. This next job I have is exactly like this one, just a different address. Unfortunately, at this time, you cannot copy an existing form. You can only create a new form. They are going to work on providing that feature, hopefully in the next year or so, in which we can copy a job, but right now that is not an option. The only way I can proceed is by starting a new project. So here, when I start a new project, it starts with, hey, do you know what form you need? Yeah, I do. So I'm not going to go through the form logic for it to help find which form I need to fill out. Do you want to do the certificate of compliance form? Nope, that's not what I'm doing at this time. I want to do the certificate of installation form. So I'm going to go here. Yep, I want the certificate of installation form. Now, I realized that there are a couple of things I forgot in our slide deck. I practiced this last night, but I obviously didn't practice that great. So oh shoot, I didn't mean to go from the very beginning. We have to go back to the slide deck for a minute. So sorry about this. This is when Gina is not as practiced as she thought she was. Okay, so when we have our certificate of compliance form, there's a few things you need to be able to find on it. So here we have the certificate of compliance form. This is what was included in the design documents that was submitted for permit, or whichever one was used to update the project. And in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a compliance ID number. There's a bunch of other numbers, but we're only looking for the compliance ID number. And this number is important because we need this to populate the certificate of installation form. And you notice that there's dashes. The dashes are important, and I'm writing down this number right now because I don't have it memorized. We will need to include the dashes. So we're going to go back to our virtual compliance assistant. And here we are ready to start things off. So it says one, what source will be used? Now, if you collect my project's permitted NRCC does not have a client compliance ID in the footer, you will see that that is not currently supported in the virtual compliance assistant. There's some rumors we might do something in the future, but I'm not quite sure at this point. It does have to be a certificate of compliance form that has the compliance ID to use the virtual compliance assistant for the certificate of installation form. So I have a compliance ID. I already wrote that number down, so I know I have that. What is your name? I'm going to say, hey, this is our test project that we're doing. Our city, we are in, I think we're down in San Diego for this particular project, which that's the wrong zip code. The zip code helps determine the climate zone. So knowing the zip code is important to set that climate zone. Climate zone doesn't really matter for lighting, but these are one of the things that the building departments ask that show up on all the forms, and they all say the same thing so that there's some continuality with how they go about supporting compliance to the energy code. I want to confirm that I'm using the 2022 version. You'll notice that's the only version we have currently in the Virtual Compliance Assistant that supports the certificate of installation. Is your building a multifamily building 4 stories or less with dwelling units? Nope, I am using, it's a retail non-residential job. So let's say it's a 3-story retail project. You might be tempted to click this to yes, saying, oh, I do have a building that's 4 stories or less. But the important thing here about this particular question is it a multifamily building 4 stories or less? Because if you click yes, then what's going to be auto-populated and provided is the LMCI form. We don't want the LMCI form because this is not a low-rise multifamily building. We want an NRCI, so we're going to make sure this stays as no. Choose which certificate of installation form you're doing. You can pick, I'm just picking the installation, the LTI form. You can add a lot more installation forms that say you're doing the LTO at the same time. You can, in the same project folder, add subsequent forms so that they're all in one place for this one address. But we're going to do the installation form. So we're going to go ahead and put in this compliance ID number, including the dashes. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself, just because you are in charge of muting yourself if you didn't want me to hear you. If you want to ask a question, I'd be happy to hear your question out loud. So here we have the compliance ID, including the dashes, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it. So what's happening now under the hood is that it is pooling the data from the certificate of compliance form to populate the certificate of installation form. It's going to ask for the building permit. I don't have it, so I'm making something up. Making this up because this is a test project. What's the permit set that was being used? What was that approved permit set? That was 401-23, but what is the as-built set? We made some changes. That was given to me dated yesterday, so that is the 17th, so that we can set what was I looking at when I created the certificate of installation form. What's the scope of work? So are you going to be documenting the luminaires or the controls, or both the luminaires and the controls? So this particular tool will allow you to pick one or both. Let's go ahead and pick both, that we're going to help the contractor provide an installation form for the entire scope associated with indoor lighting. Are you documenting for conditioned or unconditioned space types? The energy code makes us separate conditioned from unconditioned. But this particular project is all within the conditioned envelope of the building. How do I know that? That's on that certificate of compliance form that you should be using as a tool in understanding the scope of this project. What type of lighting are you documenting? This particular project only had general lighting, but if I had any additional lighting layers, such as pendants, track lighting, sales floor area lighting, etc., I would click both. but I only have general lighting. What controls are you going to be documenting? Well, I have area controls, and remember, I'm using the certificate of compliance form as my tool, or I'm using the approved design documents. So I know I have area controls. In this particular project, the only other requirements they had were for occupancy sensors. We're going to go ahead and save. I do recommend saving frequently. And you notice there's a leaderboard along the top here. So it's telling me, hey, you have successfully accomplished filling out everything regarding the scope. And what we have up next is the luminaires. The other thing that I love is over here is this compass, and I have a tendency to keep this up all the time. You can close it if you want, or you can have it open. And this is constantly giving you an update of the status of the project as you're filling it out. So you feel successful as soon as something turns from red to green, because that tells us we have filled it out completely in its entirety. Doesn't say it's right, but it does say you have completely filled this out. And it is found to be equal or better as a compliant project. So let's go on to our luminaires. So we're going to go ahead and say, yep, let's go to luminaires. And what's important here is that it is pre-populating what was promised with the certificate of compliance form. So here, what was submitted for permit was that they're going to use L1 fixtures, those reed-wired pendants. It's all in the conditioned space. These are individual luminaires. It's not track lighting. It's 80 watts per luminaire, and there's a total of 20. But remember, our contractor decided to go with something that was 60 watts. So is the install exactly as permitted, installed exactly as set up by the permitted certificate of compliance form? We're going to say no, because it wasn't. And we're going to go through and we're going to say, yep, it still is called L1 is the fixture reference. It still is an individual luminaire. They didn't change the luminaire types, but what we have now is 60 watts per luminaire, not 80 watts. And this still is a total of 20 luminaires associated with the project. So we're going to go ahead and hit save, and it's going to indicate to us whether we are in compliance as equal or better. So you'll see here that the luminaires went to a green button telling us, hey, that is equal or better. I see I have a hand up. John, did you have a question?
You're expecting me to do that for a complete lighting redesign package of 60 fixtures?
I don't expect you to. This is something that you are either choosing to do to help the contractor, or if you're the contractor, yes, I do expect you to do this.
Wow.
This has always been what's expected of you as the contractor.
So
but this is now pre-populated. It's made it easier, hopefully.
So when the contractor, a third party tester like myself, goes to a job site and you've got for whatever value engineering, someone goes out there and changes the lighting package completely than what's spec'd out, you're expecting the third party Title 24 inspector to do that?
I'm expecting the contractor to do it. This is the responsibility of the contractor. You, as the acceptance test technician, can offer a service to help support the contractor and do this for them and make money.
That makes sense. All right.
So, John, you don't have to do this. You can say, no, I'm not doing it. But you might see this as a means to help your contractors and provide an essential service, making you part of their desired team.
Yeah, because showing up at the end of the job site completion when they're looking for a certificate of occupancy is not the time to be doing this.
No, I have to tell you, I'm an energy consultant, and I'm doing it as soon as I finish the certificate of compliance form. I'm going through, and I'm not, of course, changing anything, but I'm going through and producing the certificate of installation so they see this pre-populated only their scope of work. I mean, that's what's so gorgeous about these new installation forms, is that the contractor now only has to see their scope of work, and they don't have to try and understand and read the certificate of compliance form that has walls, windows, HVAC equipment, and all this other stuff that is incredibly confusing and overwhelming when you're trying to read that compliance form. This form is meant for that contractor. So I'm doing it before the contractor even gets on board so that they have something that clearly defines their scope of work to the energy code. And then they can mark it up and tell me, hey, Gina, we got approved submittals. We're doing this. Can you make sure it's equal or better? And I offer the service of going, yeah, let me check and see if it's equal or better. Let me do this for you. I'm sharing this with you guys so that you can offer that same service I offer.
That's a good explanation. Thank you.
Okay. So we're done with the lighting because we have our green telling us, yep, everything is good here, and we're going to save and continue. Now we're going to see what was promised for the controls. Now, I know along with the rest of you guys that there are a lot of people who fill out the certificate of compliance forms by blindly pushing buttons. I get that. I see that. Now's our opportunity to make sure what is being done for the controls is true. This is another reason for you guys to get on board and do this as soon as you're part of a project. Go in, say, hey, give me your certificate of compliance form. I want the compliance ID. And I immediately want to make sure that what we're doing for installation is true. Is it true that demand response truly is not applicable to this project? I have manual area controls. Yep, I agree with that. Is it true? I really don't have any multi-level controls. They're saying they don't have to do it because it was an alteration project in which they're only using 80% of their allowance. Is that true? For shutoff controls, they're saying we're going to do that with the occupancy sensors in each space. There is no daylighting because they're using an alteration method in which they're exempt from daylighting because they're only using 80% of their allowed lighting power density. Is that true? And they're not doing any interlock systems. For this project, I'm going to say, yep, that is true. This is all what is there in place. I'm hoping what you guys are seeing, because I know what I hear a lot from Michael, is you guys get out there and none of the required controls are installed, and that the certificate of compliance form potentially was not supporting the control requirements appropriately. This is your opportunity to get in early and communicate directly with the contractor, or if you're the contractor yourself, and truly make sure the documentation supports what's required for the project. So it's a tool to help the conversation. It's not the same as being the building inspector and enforcing it, but it's a tool to get you one step closer. So we're going to go ahead and say, yep, this is the controls are going to be installed as promised, and you see we have another green button and our compliance status is now green. We can now go to the summary, and there's a few things in the summary that I know you guys will be intrigued by. So one, I go there and it says, hey, you're great, you're good to go. These are your next steps. If I did not finish everything, it would say, wait a minute, you missed a step. Go back and let me take you to the step you've missed. Just like TurboTax, if you guys have ever done your own taxes. This could be a place to add additional remarks, maybe to the contractor, maybe to the inspector, for things that might need to happen out on the job. This is where I can review the certificate of acceptance forms. Is it really true that I don't need any NRCA forms? This particular job, they're doing 20 or less fixtures that are controlled, and none of those controls are dictated, except for the shutoff, the occupancy sensors, but they're doing 20 or less, so they're exempt from the NRCA documentation process. But let's say you're like, no, wait a minute, Gina, they're doing 21 fixtures, so they're not exempt. So you can go in here and you could say, nope, I'm going to turn this into yes, and I'm going to explain it's needed. They don't get an exception, okay? This is what's needed. I'm documenting it. And now that NRCA form is being shown as required. And I can even then put in here what controls are needed. Oh, well, it doesn't look like they let me put that in here. Okay, so sorry. I thought that I could also put in the systems to be verified in here, but it doesn't look like it's letting me auto-populate that. I could also do add, edit values. I can do different ways of getting in here and changing what acceptance forms are required for the project. This is where I can also add team members. Let's say you want to have the contractor or the design professional or the energy consultant who did this originally to go back and review this. So you can add me, the energy consultant, and go, hey, go look at this, make sure you agree with everything I'm doing here. I made some changes, and I can go in and add comments. I can approve saying, yep, this looks good. Go ahead and proceed. There's ways to add people to look over your shoulder if that is a way that your company deals with this. And then it's also going to give you the ability to download the NRCI form. It's also going to be available always here to download in your Compass. That is always going to be there. So we're going to go ahead and download our certificate of installation form. And it produces it as a PDF, and there's some important things that are missing. You'll notice the project address is blank because, again, the virtual compliance assistant will not collect that data. It has to be populated after the fact. Use any PDF software of your choice to go in and make some of these edits. You'll notice that we have our authority having jurisdiction, making this up, that we're doing our general lighting and our conditioned spaces, and we're doing these controls. And it's indicating as a compliance statement that all the installed features are equal or better, as is verified by this tool, but must still be confirmed by the inspector on site. What's going on in terms of exceptional conditions? Remember, we changed the certificate of acceptance forms. Well, it's saying right here, hey, guess what? That certificate of acceptance form was changed. Go to the installer notes to see what's going on. Here we see our note saying it's needed. Got to do it. Here we see our lighting fixture schedule, what was promised, which was 80 watts, what we installed, which was 60 watts, which our fixture compliance statement states this is equal or better as determined by the virtual compliance assistant. Here we have our controls, what was promised and what was installed, and this exactly matches. There were no changes at all. Any information needed to the contractor regarding the installation criteria for the specific controls associated with the project. This was one of the important pieces that was part of the NRCI LTI forms in the previous code cycle. It is integrated into this entire process. And then a list of what acceptance testing is needed. And again, our compliance statements. There's a documentation author. That's me. I just went out and filled all of this out. There is no liability associated with my documentation author signature, but I do need to go in here and sign and put in the private information the tool will not collect. The responsible person is to be that licensed contractor, licensed engineer who is responsible for the installation. So you as the acceptance test technician, if you're not the installer, you don't sign here. You're signing as the documentation author. And you need to get this to your installing contractor and have them sign off. And if the installing contractor is not available, the general contractor is someone that also can sign off on these forms. So what do you guys think? Did that feel relatively comfortable? I mean, it's a simple step. You do have to, if there was 100 fixtures on the project, I get it. You'll have to go through 100 fixtures indicating, yes, it exactly matches. No, it doesn't. And here's what they're proposing instead. And please let me know if that's equal or better. Or it's not in scope. They decided someone else is doing it. Maybe you're doing front of house and someone else is doing back of house. And that's when we have multiple certificate of installation forms for indoor lighting, when we have multiple contractors who are sharing the scope of work, and we have to decide which contractor is signing off on what. John, you had your hand up again. Did you have another question or comment?
I did. How do you propose having the general contractor sign these? Is there a link that would link to it, or do I print it out? How do you
You
propose?
have to print it out. This tool does not collect personal information. So as far as you're going to get, you can invite them to look at it and approve it. But when it comes to the signatures, you have to download this PDF and you have to collect the signature with the hard copy or virtual. It could be, or electronic. You get the electronic download and you can ask them to sign digitally with that PDF.
And then after that, what is the next step?
Then you upload it to the NLCAA website and you leave it on site for the inspector and the building owner.
So it needs to be electronically uploaded and then also printed for the electrical contractor to visit on site. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. I
Okay.
appreciate your answer.
I appreciate questions. It makes this more exciting for me, so thank you. Okay, so we are going to go back to our slide deck and we're going to confirm the fact that, again, you're going to have to go in and fill in this project address on the certificate of installation form. You're going to have to fill out this information and get signatures for that last page. And you're going to make sure to print and sign. You're going to upload to the NLCAA site, which can be done digitally, or you're going to take the pictures of it like you would if it was hard copy. But you do need to leave a physical copy on site for the building inspector and to leave for the contractor. Anthony, did you have a question? Wasn't sure if that chat message meant you had a question. So I'm hoping if you haven't spent time on the Energy Code ACE website that that you'll check it out. We have another one of my favorite tools is Reference ACE, which is the code language itself, plus all of the appendices, which is that testing protocol that you guys are responsible for, are included. The manuals that the Energy Commission produces to help understand how the code applies. And for those of us who do energy modeling, they also have the rule book to the performance approach within Reference ACE. We have training, like I said earlier, we have live with our classes for non-residential lighting, went live all in the last few weeks. We have 2 indoor lighting classes, one just for controls, one for the compliant wattage allowances allowed for the different scopes of work. And we have an outdoor class, and we have a residential lighting class for dwelling units. Resources, we don't quite have the lighting fact sheet done yet for the 2022 code cycle. We still are working on some of our fact sheets. That is one of them. But our residential fact sheet is out and our lighting wheel is out that you might find of interest. So I'm hoping you'll come join us at no cost because you invested already at www.energycodeace.com. And that is it to my presentation. So Anthony has been asking, is there going to be a recording? Yes, there is a recording. Mario, how are you guys going to be sharing the recording of this particular event?
We might upload it to our website as a course where people can just sign up and watch it. I'm not 100% sure, or we might email everybody the link.
Okay. Any other questions from any of you? Any of you want to see anything again? Any energy code questions?
Hi, Gina. It's Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Sorry, I was tied up in an earlier meeting that ran late, and I just jumped in at the tail end here. I just want to say thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciated it. One thing that I did want to mention is when we're talking about collecting the NRCI forms, once they're signed, you're going to have to get them scanned because we do upload them into our software at the end of the testing process. We have to upload the NRCCs and the NRCIs directly into our software. So when they go to sign our NRCI forms, is the time when we upload those. So just so you're aware of that too.
Well, can't they do it digitally? If they get it signed digitally, can't they just upload the PDF?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, the PDF.
Yeah.
However,
those were the two means we were supporting, Michael. Get the digital,
yeah.
upload it, print it, scan it.
Yeah, electronically, they just have to do a transfer like they do with their photos, like the ATTs have been doing in the past. So it's nothing, should be nothing new. Just know that when you're done with your testing, you're going to have to upload the NRCCs and the NRCIs for NLCAA ATTs.
Well, so does CalCTP. So you guys are the same there. Any other questions, comments, concerns, excitement about business opportunities? You guys can always get a hold of me after today. Both Mario and Michael know how to get a hold of me. You can also submit any questions to info@energycodeace.com, and I answer them usually within a few hours. And I'm here to answer any questions you have. I'm supported by the utilities and the Energy Commission to be your resource to help you understand the energy code. So I hope I get to hear from you guys again after today.
Again, thank you very much, Gina.
Okay, I think we're good to go, Mario.
Okay, thank you, Gina.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.